Imagine living next door to a man who seemed quiet, shy and harmless, but behind his door was a nightmare. A freezer filled with human heads, barrels of acid-dissolving flesh, a scrapbook of victims' bodies. For over 13 years, Jeffrey Dahmer hid his darkest secrets in plain sight, right in the heart of America. This is the chilling story of the man the world would come to know as the Milwaukee Cannibal. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The late 1980s. On the surface, this was a neighborhood like any other. Children rode bicycles through the streets. Families grilled food on weekends. Neighbors greeted one another on the stairwells of the Oxford apartments. It was a place where people left their doors unlocked, where trust still existed. But hidden behind the door of apartment 213, something unthinkable was happening. A secret so horrifying that when it was finally revealed, it would shock not just Milwaukee, but the entire world. To understand how such evil could live undetected, we must go back to where it all began. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960 in West Allis, Wisconsin. His father, Lionel, was a chemist. His mother, Joyce, struggled with depression and anxiety. From the start, their home was filled with tension, constant arguments, emotional distance, and a lack of stability. As a child, Jeffrey was shy and quiet, but he was also strangely fascinated by death. At just 4 years old, he began collecting animal bones, describing the sounds they made as fascinating. His father, a scientist, initially thought it was a harmless curiosity. But over time, Dahmer's obsession grew darker. While other children played sports or watched cartoons, Jeffrey roamed the woods in search of dead animals. He dissected them, kept their skeletons, and developed a secret fascination with the stillness of death. Teachers noticed he was different, withdrawn, awkward, often lost in thought. By his teenage years, Dahmer was already drinking heavily. Classmates remembered him sneaking bottles of whiskey into school, drinking openly during class. He joked. He acted strangely to get attention, but behind his bizarre behavior was a boy drowning in loneliness. When his parents divorced during his senior year of high school, Dahmer's world collapsed. His mother left with his younger brother. His father was gone most of the time. Alone in an empty house, surrounded by silence, Jeffrey Dahmer's darkest urges finally broke free. It was June 1978, just weeks after his high school graduation. Jeffrey was driving through rural Ohio when he saw a young man walking along the road. His name was Stephen Hicks, 18 years old, a hitchhiker on his way to a rock concert. Dahmer pulled over, offering Hicks a ride. With his friendly smile and quiet demeanor, he seemed harmless. Hicks accepted. They drove back to Dahmer's home, where they spent hours drinking beer, lifting weights, and listening to music. But as the sun began to set, Hicks said it was time to leave. Something inside Dahmer snapped. He couldn't bear the thought of Hicks walking out that door, of being left alone again. Later, Dahmer would recall the moment. I didn't want him to leave. That's when I knew I had to do something. He picked up a dumbbell and struck Hicks from behind, then wrapped the bar around his neck and strangled him to death. The silence afterward was deafening. Dahmer sat with the body for hours, terrified yet strangely exhilarated. The loneliness was gone. For the first time, he felt he had complete control. But panic soon followed. He dragged the body to the basement, dissected it, and buried the remains in the backyard. Weeks later, consumed by fear of discovery, he exhumed the body, smashed the bones into fragments, and scattered them in the woods. At 18 years old, Jeffrey Dahmer had committed his first murder. And though he tried to live a normal life in the years that followed, his urges would never disappear. For nearly 9 years, Dahmer lived in silence. He joined the army but was discharged for alcohol abuse. He worked at various jobs, but his addiction deepened. His family noticed his drinking, his isolation, his strange habits, but no one could imagine the storm brewing inside him. By 1987, Dahmer could no longer suppress his desires. And when he killed again, he didn't stop. In November 1987, Dahmer met 25-year-old Stephen Toomey at a bar. They checked into a hotel room together. The next morning, Dahmer woke up to find Toomey dead beside him. He claimed he had no memory of killing him, but the reality was undeniable. He stuffed the body into a suitcase, took it back to his grandmother's house where he was living at the time, and dismembered it in the basement. After Tuomi, the killings escalated. Dahmer lured men, often from gay bars or the streets, back to his home. He offered them money, alcohol, or companionship. Once inside, he drugged their drinks and strangled them. But it didn't stop with murder. Dahmer began experimenting with his victims' bodies. He photographed them in disturbing poses. He kept skulls as souvenirs. He dissected, preserved, and even ate parts of the bodies. Cannibalism, he later admitted, was a way to make his victims feel like a permanent part of him. When Dahmer eventually moved into the Oxford apartments, the killings grew bolder. His unit became a chamber of horrors. Neighbors complained about the smell, the strange noises. One woman, Glenda Cleveland, repeatedly called police about the strange activity, but Dahmer always had an excuse: spoiled meat, a broken refrigerator, dead tropical fish. Incredibly, police believed him. At least once, officers even returned a victim to Dahmer's apartment. Kanarak Synthesymphone, a 14-year-old boy, escaped into the street, dazed and drugged. Neighbors called 911. But when police arrived, Dahmer convinced them it was simply a lover's quarrel. They escorted the boy back inside, straight into the hands of his killer. Hours later, Konrak was dead. Jeffrey Dahmer had become a predator in plain sight, a monster disguised as a quiet, awkward man. By the summer of 1991, Dahmer had murdered 17 men and boys. But on July 22, 1991, everything changed. That night, Dahmer invited Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old man, to his apartment. Edwards noticed the strange smell immediately. He saw a blue barrel in the corner, knives on the table, and the unsettling way Dahmer stared at him. At one point, Dahmer pressed a knife to Edwards' chest and whispered, "I'm going to eat your heart." Terrified, Edwards played along, pretending to be calm, waiting for an opportunity to escape. Hours later, he found his chance. He struck Dahmer, bolted for the door, and ran into the street, still wearing one handcuff. Edwards flagged down 2 police officers and led them back to apartment 213. Inside, the officers found Polaroid photographs of dismembered bodies. As they searched further, they opened the refrigerator and froze. Inside was a severed human head. The apartment was a house of horrors, barrels filled with acid and decomposing flesh, skulls lined neatly in cabinets, freezers packed with human remains. One officer later said, "It was like stepping into hell." That night, Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested. The quiet neighbor who waved politely in the hallway was exposed as one of the most sadistic killers in American history. The trial of Jeffrey Dahmer began in January 1992. The world watched in shock as he confessed, in chilling detail, to 17 murders. He described how he lured men, killed them, dismembered them, and sometimes consumed parts of their bodies. Families of the victims broke down in court. One father screamed at Dahmer. Another wept uncontrollably as he described his lost son. Despite the horror, Dahmer remained calm, almost emotionless. He explained that his crimes were driven by loneliness, by a need to control. Cannibalism, he said, made his victims a part of him forever. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, nearly 1,000 years in prison. But Dahmer's time behind bars would be short. On November 28, 1994, while working on prison cleaning duty, Dahmer and another inmate were beaten to death by fellow prisoner Christopher Scarver. At just 34 years old, Jeffrey Dahmer was dead. Some saw it as justice, others as an escape from true punishment. But for the families of his victims, the scars never healed. Today, Dahmer's story continues to haunt America. Books, documentaries, and even dramatizations attempt to explain how such evil could exist. But no matter how much is written, one chilling fact remains: Jeffrey Dahmer was proof that monsters can live among us, hiding behind the face of a neighbor, a coworker, a stranger on the bus, the killer next door. Jeffrey Dahmer is gone, but his shadow still lingers. His story is not just about murder. It's about how evil can hide behind the most ordinary face. For over a decade, his neighbors thought he was just another quiet man in the hallway. but behind his door was a world of horror. Dahmer's name has become a warning etched into history, that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not found in the dark, but living right next door.